Ahorita vamos a continuar entonces con la ponencia de Adriana Machado. Adriana Machado es la fundadora del Instituto Briyah, una organización que tiene como propósito unir la innovación, la práctica y el propósito al establecer alianzas estratégicas con empresas y organizaciones para diseñar soluciones para los complejos desafíos socioeconómicos y ambientales del siglo XXI. Adriana tiene una amplia carrera laboral. Es director ejecutivo del Brain Health Project, una iniciativa dirigida a prevenir Alzheimer mediante la promoción de la salud cerebral y la desaceleración del deterioro cognitivo. Asimismo, fue CEO de General Electric Brasil, pertenece al directorio de la Fundación América Solidaria y al capítulo de Miami del United Nations Association. Es un placer contar con un ponente con tan amplia trayectoria en grandes empresas, entre gubernamentales, organizaciones sin fines de lucro, que son experiencias que le otorgan una perspectiva única hacia el espíritu empresarial y con capacidad de recuperación y sostenibilidad. Adriana, welcome to the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Esta ponencia va a ser en el idioma inglés.
Buenas tardes, voy a cambiar para inglés. Entonces, good afternoon. Now I'm getting all confused here. Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Francisca, Patricia, Consuelo, for everything you've done and for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, not only because, Kennedy School of Government has always been my dream school since I was studying political science back in Brazil. Long time ago, and when I joined first the government of Brazil and then the government of the United States in Brasilia, and working for the government, I always had that, at some point I'll go there, right? But then my life changed. I moved to São Paulo. I went to the private sector, started working for big companies, and this dream kind of faded. So it was an honor to receive your invitation to come here and to speak and to be able to share my thinking with you. So thank you again very much. Well, I have some slides. I think I'm the only one who has slides here today. So let's see. So Briyah. So let me start by explaining a little bit of where I am now. So Briyah Institute is a startup. So I am now starting my journey as an entrepreneur. And I am building Briyah as a benefit corporation based in Florida. Pretty soon, I hope, we'll be ready to ask for B Corp certification. So the idea is to get the right standards, get the right practices, and start working with the right things. So I got the inspiration for Briyah from Kabbalah. So Briyah is the world of creation. I was looking for something that meant resilience or innovation, and so I found Briyah. And also Briyah is a feminine name, so it has the power of the women and the feminine power. So my mission, my vision with Briyah is to bridge the gap between innovation, practice, and purpose. So that's something that I have learned since the beginning. That's very important, innovation, and I think it makes more sense, and it's easier to wake up every morning if you have purpose. And of course, you have to use the best practices to make it happen. So an example of what we do in Briyah. So one project that is our priority project right now is the Brain Health Project. So starting with the purpose. So the purpose is to try to prevent dementia, which is a huge problem right now. It's already one top priority in public health. We already have a cost of $1 trillion for treatment of dementia globally. And by 2050, more than 152 million people will have it. And it's not only a burden on the person who has it, but on the whole family and the caretakers. And it's something that there is no cure for. So what we're trying to do is build the practice around collaboration. So have good brains behind it. So doctors and researchers who have worked all their lives with different subject areas and expertise to join forces here to hopefully have the innovation, which will be medical food that can help prevent dementia by promoting brain health. So this is one example of what we do at Briyah. And at Briyah, we also try to adopt and implement an approach that comes from complexity science. So the late Stephen Hawking said that the 21st century is probably the century for complexity theory. And what is that? So it's working with multidisciplinary approaches. It's letting the agents interact where the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. So you have the self-organizing principles, you have the emergent strategy. So all that comes from physics, chemistry, biology, and can be applied to social sciences and can help us understand the problems in a very unique and different way. So this is how I try to frame the problems when I am at Briyah. So with the lenses of complexity science, let's take a quick look at Latin America and how we stand. So if we take the larger economies in the continent right now, this is what we have. The leadership, all male, right? We have had women president in Latin America, about 7. Some of them were very disappointing. Others were very good. And I would highlight Bachelet in Chile, who also had 2 mandates and is recognized globally. I think she's the only Latin American woman who still figures in the Forbes ranking for most powerful women in the world. Laura Chinchilla, so we were speaking about Costa Rica and the transition that they're making for renewables, so she was there and still very active in especially security issues in the region. So, it doesn't matter if you're men or women. The thing is, we need good leaders, right? And we need good leaders. But if the research that are coming up that, say that diversity is good, that diversity matters, that companies that have diversity boards tend to outperform those who don't by about 35%. So we might, need to do something about this, right? And I think the way to do it is through practice, right? So where are the women in politics? They are in the cities, they are in Congress, they are in the judiciary, right? They are in the private sector, they are in the other non-governmental organizations. They are in our society, they are there. They just need to be, supported in terms of being developed to become good leaders and also be able to share the floor here with the top leaders in the region, right? So before I go on to the next one, but just to explain what I see here in terms of complexity theory too. So when I started off in my career, we would look at the countries from the GDP, so the size of the economy. So we would compare the countries by that. Then we learned from Michael Porter to look at competitiveness. And in competitiveness, one thing that strikes is innovation. So the countries, when they were considered more developed and more competitive, they clearly had some innovation happening there, right? But now, those measurements are not enough. So a measurement that I think is very helpful for us to understand the region and the world better is prosperity. So there is an institution called Legatum Prosperity Index, actually the index is called Legatum Prosperity Index, that measure over 140 items and has been going on since 2008. So it gives us a better idea of what it takes to really be able to achieve well-being. So well-being in terms of economics, so the economy, the society, and politics. So this is how we stand. The colors show exactly how we're doing in terms of prosperity in Latin America. So we're not doing, as bad as Africa, but we're not doing as good as other parts of the world either. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Well, so, that's the snapshot. That's the current scenario that I see, and we have to see what we can do about the change that we want to see in this region. So just to go back a little bit to the number of women that we have coming up, in Brazil we had elections for mayors in 2016, and only about 11% of the mayors are women. But we do have more women in Congress, in the Senate, and the House, and I'm sure this is also happening in other parts of the world. And again, innovation is very important for change, and in prosperity, innovation is also important too. But as a professor here from Harvard also says, it's Clayton Christensen from the Harvard Business School, it's not any kind of innovation. We need to focus on innovation that's market creating, that's going to tap into those non-consumers, that's going to bring solutions to our problems, right? So this is a very important element. So innovation matters, but innovation that creates new markets. This will have like a pull effect of other resources that can come in because of that movement. So the key takeaways here with the Legatum Prosperity Index. In general, the countries are doing better in terms of prosperity overall, right? But also the gap between those who are doing better and those who are doing worse has increased. So the disparities are still there. So I think Professor Christensen has this point that the only way to change this paradox is not only working to increase the economies, but to work to increase innovation that can be market creating. So by with that in mind, and the need to be innovative and the need to change the situation we have here, I would like to bring an example of a leader in Latin America that's very dear to my heart. Unfortunately, she is not with us anymore, and but she did something very positive for my country, and I want to share that with you. So this was Ruth Cardoso. So she was first lady during President Fernando Henrique's administration from 1995 to 2002, but she was a PhD in anthropology. She really knew what society was formed of, how social movements worked. And she was, she had the privilege of sitting in that chair and being a social innovator and changing forever the role of a first lady by actually doing a great social reform for Brazil. So she transformed the traditional charity approach of the First Lady, creating a project called Comunidade Solidária. But at that point, I don't know if she had any idea that she was using complexity science. So I did this exercise of kind of reviewing the project and the great things she did with these lenses. And here's what I got. So when you talk about complexity, as I said, you have some properties, right? And self-organizing is one property. And if you take a look at Comunidade Solidária, then you will see that it was decentralized. It had multiple stakeholders. There was engagement from civil society. So she didn't decide to do something top-down. She worked from bottoms up, calling everybody in to join forces. So churches, NGOs, private sector, universities, and the government. It was non-linear, so the programs that were created were in healthcare, in education, in microfinance, the legislation, the framework for partnerships between the public and the private sectors to happen. They were all there, and they came at different times, and it emerged. She really tapped into the dynamics of society, so she strengthened the networks. And more than that, she recognized that she needed to empower women. So when she defined who would receive the allowance for the children that would go to school, it was the mother. So the women could be empowered in their families, in their communities, and in the organizations. And she also saw something very important. She realized that about 30% of the population was between 10 and 24 years old, and 80% of those adolescents were in cities. About 10% didn't have any education, and about 33% had only had 3 years of school. So the focus was on the woman and on the child. And they did great. And to finish here, and more importantly, it was adaptive. So the programs were not created by her and adopted top-down by the federal government. No, she knew how society worked, and she was able to tap into that dynamics, and the projects emerged, but they were, adaptive. They could change depending on how the feedback loop worked. So just an exercise here. And I would like to complement that exercise with something that a friend of mine from the Florida International University, Bob Hacker, says. When you have a disorganized group. So when society is not so organized, usually the bigger node, like the federal government, is very strong. But when you decentralize, when you have more organizations from the bottom, then you have the powerful node kind of collapses, and you can have smaller nodes, and those can be very, very powerful. And this is a movement we see now in the region and in the world, actually, with cities. So we don't have to wait for the federal government to work. We can work with cities. And they are the ones who are having to respond to the citizens more directly to the challenges we face today. We have huge wealth inequality happening. We have a huge amount of information and technology advancing so fast. And we have the climate changing and impacting us so much. And the cities are now getting together and kind of taking a more active role in those agendas, but also forming networks. And I would like to just highlight a couple here that I think are very important. First, the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities. So those red dots you see there are the cities in Latin America that already received this program, and their methodology is great because they identify stresses and shocks in that city, and they built a resilience agenda. And they invite all the community to participate in, and hopefully they will be able to fund the priority projects. Nature Conservancy is also doing great work in the region, creating water funds. Biodiversity is so important. We have to include that in the mix. And I was so pleased to see Kennedy School of Government student and a professor also from the design college here in Miami discussing how to have created ways to finance and to fund resilience projects for adaptation, for climate change. They were just there last week, and amazing work that they're doing. And this is a student-led group that happens here. It's a climate leaders group. And this student, Laura O'Connell, is an example, a role model, and they're working together with other organizations. And just to close here, so the C40, Bloomberg Associates, they're working in this nexus of innovation, funding this innovation for resilience and governments. How can you structure that? So another professor that I like very much that uses this concept of complexity that is very important also for the way business operates is Eric Beinhocker. So he's based in Oxford, and he's rethinking capitalism based on complexity theory. So he says that economies, companies, cities, they're all complex adaptive systems. And we have to find a new role for business with more sense of purpose and accountability. So when we think of what the companies are doing right now, so we talked about that in the previous panel here, that the role of business is changing, or at least the perception is changing, and more business corporations are engaging in driving this agenda. So I like this graph from Maximilian Martin, and he has a book on how to build the impact economy that's very nice. And what he shows here is, in the beginning, companies started working with corporate social responsibility because of compliance. Then they started caring for the communities that they're inserted in and started doing philanthropy. Only then they started seeing, oh, that kind of, is important, so let me put that as part of my strategy. Now we see that, it's only going to matter and make a difference if you make that part of your investment strategy too, so your venture strategy. And, we have many examples of companies who are now acquiring smaller business or complementing their portfolio with more sustainable material companies or energy or, different technologies that complement their take. And more companies are embracing the Sustainable Development Goals and trying to tackle this agenda. So there are 169 targets. There's enough problem there to solve. So you can just pick and choose. And they're trying to do that with good reporting. So ESG metrics, environment, social governance. And hopefully more and more companies will become B Corps, right? Another very important aspect that I'd like to leave with you with is I learned this from Muhammad Yunus, so a Nobel Nobel Prize winner that says that we only have unemployment because we have employment. Because people think and have, they have to prepare themselves to get a job, to get that perfect job somewhere, instead of having the mindset of an entrepreneur who creates the job. So he has this wonderful saying that we're not job seekers, we're job creators. And it doesn't mean that we have to go out and create our own companies. This journey can be bumpy, but it means we can be entrepreneurial wherever we are. We can embrace the entrepreneurial spirit. We can make, something different just because we have a different mindset. We're into it. So let's learn that lesson for good. And if you don't know, what you can do, what, your purpose in life is, I love this exercise that the Japanese concept of ikigai shows us. So you take a look at what you're passionate about, what you love to do, what you know how to do, what the world needs, and what the world will pay you for, and, kind of reflect upon it and find in the middle your purpose. And if the quantum physicists are right, and that we are all connected, that's, energy, that we vibrate, our intentions really matter. So we better find purpose in our lives and put that to work, because that's important. And he was saying, talking about consciousness in 1918, when he won a Nobel Prize for Physics, and that's still valid now. So I would leave you with 3 things to keep in mind. So innovation, to run this region in a different way, to change the model, to be able to promote change and have prosperity, we have to be able to foster innovation that is job creating. Number 2, so we need the networks, the power of networks. We have to tap into that. So connecting and making the nature of these connections as best as we can, right? And third, but not least, purpose. So if our intentions matter, we gotta, find them. We're gonna find our purpose. We gotta empower the individual to have a purpose, so everybody can have, something that makes sense. And we all bring a very unique thing to the world. So with this wonderful education you're getting here at Harvard, and with your purpose in mind, go out and make your mark in the world. Thank you.